Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks, here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, as part of our midweek check-in with our partners at Media Play News. As always, it feels like there's stuff to talk about the Warner Brothers deal, but this was kind of a big one. Netflix, which has a signed deal with Warner Brothers Discovery, said, yeah, you can go ahead and talk it one more time for a week to Paramount, Skydance, and let the hilarity ensue. What'd you think, Dan?
I'm looking for your kind of oracle direction here. It's a little confusing to me. It doesn't seem like the majority of the board has changed its mind in terms of which direction they want to go. Is it a small fraction that's still Paramount curious, is being appeased here? What is happening?
It is funny that you invoke the word Oracle, given that Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, is
Sure, I'm
bankrolling
aware.
Paramount, Skydance's stuff.
It's
But I
intentional.
think that what's happened. It was interesting to listen to Ted Sarandos speak on Tuesday on CNBC. I sat down with Julia Boorstin, and her grandfather, by the way, was one of the great historians of his era. Daniel Boorstin wrote The Discoverers and The Explorers. Totally recommend those for anybody who wants to read up on finding the New World, or it was new to the Europeans. Anyway, back to the topic at hand.
Your
The
dog is
Ellisons,
very distracting. Very
this
cute.
is an animatronic dire wolf in the headquarters of Colossal Biosciences, and behind that is a giant wall. This was all constructed by Weta Workshop, Peter Jackson's little visual effects shop that now does a whole lot of other stuff, and at the headquarters of the new headquarters of Colossal in Dallas, where I was last week. So
Well, that's Tom
thank you.
Brady's dog.
They bought Viagen, which
Yeah.
is the company that did Dolly the sheep 40 years ago and has been cloning things ever since, including Tom Brady's dog. And Tom Brady, like Peter Jackson, an investor in Colossal Biosciences, as is, given the direwolves involved, George R. Martin, Mr. Game of Thrones himself. So they've got some real Hollywood money in there, but they got a lot of money, period. $615 million plus another $100 million in their philanthropic foundation. Anyway, someday I'll get back on topic here.
Why? Why?
Basically, what happened is the Ellisons been throwing a lot of stuff against the wall and haven't moved the total value of the deal. They put in some things like, we'll cover up front the termination fees. We'll put this ticking fee in place every quarter. It goes up a quarter, 25 cents a share for every quarter after the end of the year for what we'll pay you. But they never said it's going to get off of $30 a share for everything. But they apparently, if you read between the lines with what Ted Sarandos said on CNBC, they've been throwing a lot of stuff up there. Maybe they go to 31, maybe they go to 32. It'll be so much more valuable. They could do that, but they haven't done it. They're already highly leveraged. Yes, Larry Ellison, one of the richest people in the world, but even Larry Ellison, if you got to guarantee $40 billion of your $250 billion, it's going to take a little bite out of you, I mean, and Oracle's not, their shares have
Yeah,
been up
it's
and down
already
lately.
kind of extended, so this would extend them a lot more.
It would be very, yeah, Oracle's maybe out over its skis, but this and that's a lot of debt at a complicated time. So you would, one of the things I thought was really interesting, Sarando said, they say Paramount Skydance to make their deal pencil out, they'll have to do $6 billion in reduction. He says, actually, when you look at what they say they need to do to pencil it all out, it's more like 16 billion,
That's a
which is
lot
a
of stuff.
large number. That's a lot of cuts, right?
Yeah.
And, there are those people in Hollywood who are like, oh, but Paramount loves movies. They'll keep doing more movies. They'll do, instead of just 15 from Paramount and 15 from Warner Bros., they'll do 30. It's like, if you're cutting, say it's between 6 and 16, 12 billion, 11 billion, that's like halfway, I guess. Man, what's left? And you still got to generate all the income from your cable operations and your linear operations from
And of course, all
CBS.
those movies will be successful and generate gobs of revenue. Let's just
Gobs of
assume
revenue.
that. Yeah.
Gobs. Simply gobs. So some of that could happen, but boy, I threw that out there almost in passing, and I do not think that was an in passing kind of lob of a very large grenade. Basically he said, we got some cards, you got some cards. You guys keep saying, well, we could have 3 aces. Or we could go 2 aces and 2 kings. not put more money out there, but we'll say maybe we could put more money out there. And so basically what Sarandos said is, you got a week. Show us your cards. Go for it. You guys got a week. We'll see what you got. And then that's it. No more bullshit,
So
to
this
use the
notion
technical
that
term.
was reported, Bloomberg broke the story that the board had agreed to hear when we're Paramount offer, to see if it was, quote, superior. And the early pickups of that exclusive, there was a tone that Paramount had seized momentum upper
Right.
hand.
Right.
And
Well, journalists in their horse races, right? I mean, there are not a lot of tracks out there, but boy, we sure love our horse races in politics and deal making.
right, Netflix didn't seem happy about that.
Well, of course they wouldn't be.
Yeah,
I will say, you have mentioned before, his time in front of the Senate committee a couple weeks ago, how polished and really smooth that
well,
Sarandos was in that thing.
organic. He's an
Yeah,
operator,
he has been extremely well media trained. Borson kept lobbing in, well, if you don't get it, what does that mean? He's like, we're not going to talk about it. We have a deal. We're moving forward. What if they ask for more money? It's like, let's see what they got. We're not going to say anything till we see what they have. It looks like right now, this is what they have, and ours is a better deal because there's this whole other set of stuff. Well, what if they take more debt? If you take more debt out of there so it doesn't go in discovery, what is that? What is that? It's like,
what
not
if
talking
Sleeper
about that.
uh,
Yeah. So that was smart on his part. He clearly is very well trained, whoever his handlers are, and I'm sure they're top of the line. I've known people that used to be head of comms for them, and she was great. So I'm sure whoever succeeded her is great, but he knows what he's doing. But show us what you got. Stop saying we could do this or we might have that or whatever, because they still haven't moved shareholders to redeem their shares in any notable way based on the deals that are out there. Even the latest sweeteners, I think it's still just a handful of percentage points of the total Warner Brothers shares have been committed to a Paramount tender offer, a hostile proxy and all that. So March 20th is the day that the board, that they'll have a shareholders meeting and all that stuff. They've got a week to talk about it. Netflix has time after that to see if they need to do anything. I suspect, and I'll throw this out there.
Well, I'm confused about the timelines. Let's clarify for this. So Paramount has a week from today, roughly.
Well, yesterday,
Yeah.
from this week. It's through to early next week. We'll just call it that.
So they have to make yet another hostile counteroffer, and then we sit on our hands until March 20th, when the UBD board convenes, and then smoke
Makes a
comes out of it.
decision. Yeah. But that's when they have a shareholders meeting to ratify something. So
theoretically, we could kind of know what direction we're going definitively after that date.
well, yeah. Ish. I mean, because that would be too easy.
Right.
So let's just say they come back and maybe they bump it to $30.50 or 31 or whatever. And they say, this is more. And the board goes, don't think so. They can still pursue their hostile tender offer, their proxy vote. That would be playing out as part of the special shareholder meeting on March 20th. And I presume they would. If they come back and Warner Brothers goes, that's good. They absolutely have a fiduciary responsibility to go back to Netflix and say, well, this is better with the things that they have now agreed to do that they didn't agree to do before. What say you? So they could come back. And then whatever the board decides is the thing that will be before shareholders on the 20th. Now, again, that's a big day, but it's not the only day.
This is my outsider question. I guess the first thing I thought when news of all this emerged Sunday was that kind of early vibes given off by the Justice Department. They just replaced their antitrust chief or fired her.
Right. Yeah, she wasn't antitrustful enough.
She wasn't.
Antitrustworthy enough. So she left, and I mean, the
that
problem
testimony
is
by
that
Sarandos last week, and the resistance he faced. So that
Yeah.
has nothing to do with it.
Well, the machinations of the U.S. Department of Justice under the able leadership of Pam Bondi is such that I, for one, have no idea what they're doing over there because I just want to be like them because they don't know either. Things are being done for political reasons, and sometimes that doesn't work out when you actually go into a court of law. It looks bad. It looks great on your Twitter feed or your X feed, but it doesn't really work in front of a lot of judges, including, I might point out, Trump appointees go, huh? This isn't how originalism works. Anyway, the real issue is then it goes, but Sarandos again dropped a little bomb. He said, this deal, once we get approval from the board and we're able to go forward, it is not just the U.S. Department of Justice that matters. If you look at Netflix, they're in 190 plus countries. If you look at HBO Max, it's in over 100. There's a lot of regulators out there. And a whole bunch of them are not controlled in any way whatsoever by Donald J. Trump
Yeah,
or Pam Bondi or any of those
utility
guys.
commissions for California and New York. We talked about this before.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the attorneys general. Some of the big Democratic-leaning states might wade in too, but beyond the United States is a big chunk of Netflix's viewership, but it's not even half, right? And HBO is, I think, shooting for 150 countries at some point. Now, if they do merge, they'll be in 200 or 190 or 193, whatever the number is this week. So they'll need to get sign off from all those regulators. Most of them will be fairly perfunctory, but EU is not a perfunctory review. The UK has its own regulatory regime, its own Ofcom and all the rest that do their stuff. So that's not going away.
Speaking of EU, this whole CBS Colbert thing kind of stinks.
That was PU, not EU. PU. Yeah. But we kind of, you rightly spotlighted this in our beloved weekly newsletter a few weeks ago when you said that Brendan Carr was once again invoking or reapplying the equal time laws for political appearances on late night talk shows, which were considered, I don't think, very serious political venues for a long time. I mean, Bill Clinton was playing a saxophone, et cetera, et cetera. But they were able to have whomever on without having to have everybody else who was running for that office in there. Now we've seen them, CBS, again, under David Ellison's watchful eye, much more accommodating of Trump administration views. They said, we're not going to let this guy speak because he's a candidate for office.
Take that obscure state-centric race that, Texas is important to the national political landscape, obviously, but how much would any of us be talking about any of this if it hadn't been for this scandal, if you want to call it that? I mean, Carr is achieving the opposite aim of, I think, hurting his cause more than helping it.
Well, I like to think of him as an overachiever in whatever he does. It may not always be in a positive direction, but he's certainly overachieving. So there's that. So, hats off to B. Carr for that. The issue is, I think, within CBS, remember, Colbert goes away, I think, in May. His contract ends, his show ends. They didn't tell him that they had said to the FCC, we're not going to let this guy on in response to your fair equal time requirements. And he was annoyed by that, and it's something. But, Anderson Cooper left 60 Minutes, his side gig, his side hustle of the last nearly 20 years, because he's just tired of messing with clowns like Barry Weiss, who's still figuring out which way is up, which, given her background, not a surprise, not necessarily in a positive way, is she figuring this stuff out.
You still subscribe to Paramount
Think of the
Plus?
money they're saving with Anderson leaving, though.
You still a Paramount Plus subscriber?
Yeah. Look at Landman. Dude, you got to make some accommodations. Now, I subscribe to everything because I kind of got to watch at least the things that are hot as best I can so I can at least talk somewhat knowledgeably to them. I will confess, I do not have AMC, a Shudder and the like, because I'm not a horror guy. And even my vast budget can't encompass everything. But yeah, I still got Paramount Plus. I don't have Showtime anymore, though. That's gone. save all that money. They don't really do Hulu, but it's sort of folded into Disney Plus. So I feel like I'm so much further off. Yeah, for a while they were doing Showtime separately from Paramount or a Paramount Showtime bundle. And, I don't think there was a lot of demand for that. I mean, it does what it does well. Showtime had a handful of very good shows and a bunch of shows that didn't really show up, and no one's going to pay for them.
Speaking of demand, I think there's demand that we shut this down.
I think there is. It's coming from across the Houstings, as they say in political talk. With that, I am David Bloom with my co-founder Daniel Frankel of Next TMT in this podcast, and the one we do each week on Sundays that comes to your mailbox with our newsletter on Monday mornings. Next TMT and Next TMT Talks. This is our midweek check-in with Media Play News, our beloved part. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.